Hello, I'm Laura Bennett with German with Laura, and this is my final video in a 10-part series on how to learn German smarter, not harder. In this video, I want to share with you my top study tips that, if followed, can help you become fluent in German. But before we talk about the do's and don'ts, let's first discuss what does it mean to be fluent in a foreign language? Well, let's start with what it doesn't mean. For one thing, it does not mean that you have to have a massive vocabulary. Language is like an iceberg. The bulk of it is underneath the surface of the water. Those are the words that we understand, but we don't actually use ourselves. And then above the water, the tip of the iceberg, those are the words that we actually use. So now, with that in mind, think about this. In order to be fluent in German, you have to have a vocabulary size that's just a third of that of a native German speaker. Okay, so your iceberg is only going to be a third the size of a native German's, and yet you're still going to be fluent. That's awesome news. We're going to talk more about the details in a second. The second point, though, on what fluency is not, is that it is not a matter of one-to-one English to German translations. In fact, translating is one of our don'ts that we're going to talk about a little bit later on in this video. Finally, being fluent in a foreign language, such as German, does not mean that you're going to be equally comfortable in all situations. Think about it this way. You're still going to be the same person whether you're speaking German or you're speaking English. So whatever situations or scenarios you don't feel very comfortable in English, you're not going to feel comfortable in those same situations in German either. More on that in just a second. So this is what fluency is not. Now let's talk about what fluency is. Well, for one thing, we could perhaps rephrase this to fluid flexibility so we can be more specific about what we're really talking about. When you're fluent in German as a foreign language, you need to have, yes, an essential core base vocabulary that you feel really comfortable with. And since you feel really comfortable with it, you're going to be able to be creative and flexible working with what you've got to fill in whatever gaps you may continue to have forever. I'm fluent in German, and yet my vocabulary size is definitely not that of a native speaker's, but because I have a basic vocabulary that I feel really comfortable with, I can navigate through any situation still very fluidly, very comfortably, and convey the meaning that I want to have, even if I'm using a slightly different word than maybe the precise word I would choose in English, or if I have to use a few extra words to describe what I'm talking about because I don't know that exact vocabulary word that I'm going for. For example, imagine that I don't know the word for pipes in German, but I want to talk about the plumbing in my house. And so I say, yeah, you know, those long, round, hard things all throughout the house that water flows through. And then the German I'm talking to says, pipes? Yes, pipes. That's what I'm talking about. Now I've actually just learned a new word in a real life context that I'll hopefully be able to hang on to, okay? But even in lieu of knowing the word for pipes, I could still quickly, easily, fluidly, comfortably describe what I was talking about, and that totally works. If you pay attention to how you speak in English, you'll find that you frequently do the same thing, even in your native language. We don't know all the words that exist in English, and there are many circumstances where you could argue that there's the perfect word that if only it could come to mind, that would be what would fit in this given scenario. But you frequently will just use the other words that you have access to in the moment and still paint the picture that you want to get across, even if it's not exactly precise as it could be. Another example that I use to bring this home is with a word such as magnanimous, right? Magnanimous is a beautiful word and it means something really specific, and in certain contexts it could be the word that you really want to use in English or in German. But for some reason it doesn't come to mind, or maybe in German you just don't know that word at all. But that's okay, because you know other words that still get at the same idea: generous and giving and thoughtful and kind and whatever, and you still build the picture of someone who is magnanimous. Okay, So then finally, what fluency is it is building selective skills that you hone, right, because of their relevancy to you. So for example, in English, I can't listen to songs on the radio and understand 100% of the lyrics for whatever reason. I just have a hard time with that. I'll say, what are they talking about? And so clearly, I can't then have the expectation that I'll be able to listen to German pop songs on the radio and be able to understand 100% of them. If you can't do something in English, you're probably not going to be able to do it in German. But the thing is, if you stay focused on not only what you're good at, but what is important to you and what you like, it doesn't matter if you don't understand it. So like for another example, in English, I don't enjoy watching news reports. I understand news reports in English, but I don't like watching news reports in English. In German, just like in English, there tends to be some very specific vocabulary that gets used in news reports. And I don't know all of that vocabulary, but that doesn't bother me because I don't want to be watching news reports in German anyway. So that's not vocabulary that I'm going to concern myself with because that's not relevant to my life. So you have to really, really think about what are the goals that you have for using German. They have to line up with who you already are as a person, what you're good at, what's important to you, etc. So once you have all that figured out, the key to becoming fluent in German is that you need to go through the process of what I call building a German brain. What does this look like? So you already have a framework in your head for English. We need to build a second separate framework for German so that you have two brains inside your head that you can ultimately switch back and forth between, just like turning the light on and off. And to do this, you have to properly internalize information, not just short-term memorize things, say with flashcards. It has to be really incorporated to who you are. You need to learn things correctly so that you don't have to learn them more than once. You need to have better retention, better recall. You need to do everything about learning German in the most efficient and effective ways possible, right? Learn German the smart way so it doesn't take forever and it doesn't feel impossible in the process, okay? So all of the do's and don'ts that I'm going to teach you now are going to be about increasing your confidence and your comfort level, helping you learn things the smartest way possible so that you can build this German brain that you can then be totally tapped into whenever you need to use German and bypass the English altogether. So there are three big don'ts that get in the way of building a German brain that keep you from ever attaining proficiency, much less fluency in German. The first one is speaking too soon. This is basically what's preached by everyone else, is that you have to start speaking right away in order to get comfortable in German. And I too recommend that you start speaking right away, but using a very different process, very different methodology that I call scripted speech, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. The second big don't is translating. Don't translate. We want to bypass English as much as possible and connect ideas or concepts directly to German. More on this in just a second. Finally, the third big don't is don't do random, right? So in previous videos in this series, we talked about how to learn noun gender the smart way, how to learn declensions the smart way, word order the smart way. That's all about patterns, principles, rules, connections, associations. That's what our brains like. Our brains can hang on to that kind of contextualized information. There's deeper meaning behind it. It's not just isolated. It's all fit together like pieces to a puzzle. That's what our brains like, and you have to learn this way if you really, really want to become fluent in German. So there's one big meta solution to these three don'ts, and that is learning in context. When you contextualize information, right, making connections, associations, fitting things together like puzzle pieces, that means that you're working with grammar patterns and principles and rules. That means that you're working with what I call living vocabulary. More on that in a second. And then finally, this concept I already mentioned of scripted speech versus creating your own utterances too soon. So we're going to break down each of these three categories, starting with the grammar. So when you learn grammar in context, this is things such as, say with noun gender, instead of following the conventional wisdom of memorizing a random daddy das in front of every noun, because there are thousands of them, keep in mind, right? When you instead work with noun endings and noun groups, right? And associate gender with those, that height is feminine and ich and ling, those are masculine, and ment and ma, that's neuter, so on and so forth. And groups, right, that you have alcoholic beverages are masculine, and so on and so forth. When you learn like that, when you understand a deeper meaning, a deeper cause to why a noun is masculine or feminine or neuter, because there's a reason, right? There's a reason. It's either because it belongs to a noun group or it has a noun ending. Almost all the time, there will be a reason for it. It's not random. And when you show your brain the logic, the rhyme to it all, our brains hang on to that. We like that, okay? So that's the smarter way to learn. It's efficient, it's effective. The same thing applies to declensions, right? Forget about the 10 plus charts that the conventional wisdom would have you use that don't show you how all of the dots connect, right? It keeps it all isolated and mysterious, and you have to rely on those charts. You're so dependent on them because you don't understand how they work. If instead you use the all-in-one declensions chart and the declension patterns graphic, you understand what's happening. You can connect the dots. You're empowered to manipulate declensions yourself and know when and where and how to use the correct ones. And the same thing with word order, right? So just patterns, principles, rules, that's going to work for you. That's the smarter way to learn. That is contextualized learning as concerns grammar. So now this concept of living vocabulary. I am not a fan of flashcards for multiple reasons. One, flashcards are usually a translation exercise, right? You have the German on one side of the card and the English on the other. We don't want to do that. We want to bypass English whenever possible. Think about it like this. It's like a triangle. The goal is to learn German, okay? Whatever that German word is that you're trying to work on, you have two options, two pathways for getting there. You can either connect directly from the concept, which is what you want to do, okay? Or you can do it the long, hard way by going from the concept to English, which then you're translating into German. We don't want to do it this way. So the thing about it is, without realizing it on a subconscious level, you think in images and in feelings in English, right? So words come out of our mouth, but we don't think the words in our head first. We think in pictures, we think in sensations, and then we have words that are directly associated with those images, with those feelings or sensations. You want to do that same thing in German, and it's totally possible. You just have to be intentional about it. And some of the ways that you can go about making this direct connection from the concept to German is like this. When you're working with concrete vocabulary, okay, so say furniture around the house, go and touch the furniture, sit on the furniture, crawl underneath the furniture, somehow interact with the furniture while you're drilling that vocabulary. That makes it become so much more alive, real, pertinent than just working with flashcards, right? And then even better yet is if instead of just sitting on the couch and saying in German, die Couch, die Couch, die Couch, if you can say a simple sentence and contextualize even more and say, die Couch ist blau, die Couch ist weich, die Couch ist klein, right? And use an adjective to describe the couch each time. That's really, really contextualized. That's super awesome. That's putting it in in a whole setup that you can actually use, right? Because you're never, well, I shouldn't say never, but you're rarely, right, going to use a noun like that in pure isolation, right? It's not like you're a 5-year-old who's going to go around the room just pointing to everything that you know how to say, and in German be saying ceiling, wall, floor. No, you need to say something more than that. You need to say, man, this floor is hard, or I like the color of these walls, or the ceiling is so tall, or the window is so big, or whatever. You're going to say something else. So if you practice in that kind of context and you make it real by using your body, right, by touching the pillow while you're talking about how soft it is, and sitting on the couch while you're talking about how it's new and it's large and whatever, that's going to stick in your brain better. It's contextualized. Finally, then, making something visual. Whenever you can't actually in real life be touching or manipulating the vocabulary that you're working with, and this can include verbs and stuff too, act them out like you're just doing charades with yourself. That's powerful usage of your body to learn something. When you can't do that, you need to then use your imagination, okay? You need to think in images. So say you can't learn table by going around and touching the table and whatever, you conjure up the image of a table in your head. And while you're holding on to that image, you associate it directly to then the target German for that, which is der Tisch. Okay, so now on top of that, we can layer on additional imagery, additional associations that help it stick in our brains all the better, so that again, we can learn right, learn once. Okay, and that is, for example, color coding. I color code red for masculine nouns, blue for feminine, green for neuter. So you can conjure up an image of a red table, right? It's red. It's not blue. It's not green. It's not some sort of other color. It's red. And that helps your brain remember that Tisch is a masculine noun, okay? You can take this one step further and use wacky associations like Superman. You associate Superman with all masculine nouns. So now I'm seeing Superman totally clothed in red, and he's hefting the table around, and then he's breaking off the legs of the table, and he's pounding on the table, stomping on the table, breaking the table, whatever. Make it this weird little video in your head with all of these associations, and that's going to help you remember not only the word itself, Tisch, 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 while you're seeing this happen in your head, but it'll help you remember the gender, okay? So this is powerful, living vocabulary, not just isolated words on flashcards. Okay, then finally, this big don't speak too soon. Like I was starting to say before, students are frequently recommended to start talking right away, but there are so many problems with this approach. One, you don't understand grammar principles yet, so you're going to make grammar mistakes left and right. Two, you just started learning, so you don't really have any vocabulary on which to draw, which makes it rather hard to talk about anything. Then thirdly, the sounds of German are brand new to you, so you're probably going to mispronounce things, the inflection won't be very good, your accent might be terrible, and the whole thing will be halting. You're just going to be stumbling over your tongue, which means you're not going to feel comfortable, you're not going to feel confident, and you're going to then be not only solidifying potentially all of these grammar mistakes or vocabulary that you're using incorrectly, but you're also going to be confirming in yourself, wow, I'm not good at this, I'm not good at speaking German, I'm never going to learn this, I feel so uncomfortable, I don't have self-confidence, etc. This sets you up for failure, creating your own German too soon. So instead, what you need to do is work with scripted speech so that, yes, you still start speaking right away, which is important, but in a very, very particular fashion. So what this looks like is, one, you start with German that's already been created for you, right? It's scripted. This is German songs, German movies, German books, right? You ingest all the authentic German that you can find, but you also have to interact with it. You have to work with it. Print off those lyrics to that song you really like and sing along with it, right? Read a book in German if you like reading, and have the audio book at the same time, listening to it and reading the book aloud yourself. And what this does when you work with scripted speech is that you build up comfort, right? Your body gets used to making these new sounds, which then builds confidence, right? It feeds confidence, and you're going to be matching your pronunciation and your inflection to what you're hearing from a fluent German speaker, right? And then you're also going to be always using correct German and great vocabulary because, again, it's been created for you. It's been scripted for you. You don't have to come up with that stuff yourself. And then after a while of doing this, right, you have learned some grammar principles, you've built up some vocabulary, you're feeling comfortable making these German sounds. You get to the point, of course, of creating your own German utterances. But if you wait and reach that step a little bit further down the road and start just with the scripted speech, this is so powerful. This is how you can build an authentic accent. Your pronunciation can be great, your inflection, etc., and you won't be solidifying all of these grammar mistakes or incorrect vocabulary or what have you. This is the smart way to start speaking German. So there you have it. Those are my top study tips for how you can become proficient or even fluent in German if you avoid the 3 big don'ts of don't speak too soon, don't translate, and don't do random, and instead you build a German brain that stands on its own, right? And you're not translating, but instead you're connecting directly to the concept. You're using scripted speech. You're working with patterns and principles and associations and connections all over the place. You contextualize the learning, make it real, make it tangible, make it a puzzle. Find the rhyme and reason, the logic behind everything that you learn in German, and your brain will hang on to that gladly. Okay, so if you are ready to take your German learning to the next level and be on the path to success, on the path to fluency, the next thing you need to do is you need to analyze English. You need to feel comfortable with what you already know so you can apply it to German. This is the smart way. So if you have not already, click in the description below, open up that link in a new tab, register for my free course, English Grammar for German Learners. If you have not done this already and you still don't feel like doing it right now, then hang in there. I'm going to give you a bonus 11th video in which I will walk you through in greater detail what that course contains, what you're going to learn, how you're going to learn it, why it matters, because that is the next step, my friends, to learning German smarter, not harder.